Hi, Erin. Welcome.
Sorry, just realised I was sighing on mute, and I wasn't on mute. Looking at my emails. Hello.
I think you were on mute. I didn't hear you sigh, but
Okay.
welcome anyway.
Thanks.
Great. So lots more people jumping in. We'll just wait 2-3 more minutes until everybody's online. Can most of you see my screen already? See the slides already? Yeah, they're a little bit small. Maybe I make them a bit bigger. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Thomas. We're just waiting 2 minutes for people to join.
Sure.
Okay, great. So we've got a few more people jumping in. I'll keep admitting them as we go along. But welcome everybody. Can everybody see my the screen with the PowerPoint on? Great. So welcome, and today I am flying solo because James unfortunately had another meeting, but Jonathan has agreed very kindly to help co-facilitate, but it also means that I'll be relying on you guys to contribute a lot and chat a lot, and you can either, as usual, put your chats in the chat function and the conversation there, or sort of unmute yourself, raise a hand, however you want to. This is a bit more informal, this meeting, because we really want to sort of kickstart discussion on the future directions of where this group is going. So as a little bit of background for this call, there's Hajar, very important member. So there we go. Hi, welcome Hajar, we're just starting. A little bit of background for this call. We started these working groups, I guess, 3 years ago with the start of the GPA in Berlin in January 2018. And this group has been, I think, really useful for bringing us all together, for learning about different data points, for learning about the indicators piece of work, but also for sharing our research and evidence priorities and our learning from our own different projects. But during those 3 years, a lot of other sort of seminars and events, and now everything is online. Fantastic, we can all attend everything, whether we're there in person or not, have come into play, including the Energypedia webinars, which I know many of you both present at and attend regularly. And the Energypedia webinars really are a great space. Sorry, Anne, I'll just mute you. Are a really great space for sharing project outputs and knowledge that has been sort of created within projects. And so partly because of that, and partly because it's a 3-year mark and we wanted to have a general check-in, we decided that we should have, a while ago, that we should have this sort of check-in about the future directions and really get feedback from all of you on where we're going with this group and what would be of most use for you guys. And we have really, quite a lot of flexibility on what we should do and how we should do it. So in order to inform that, as you all know, we sent out a survey monkey just, I think, before Christmas, and asked you all to sort of complete that. Loads of people did complete that, over 30 members in the group, so that was great. And part of today will be to look at the results of that survey. So, and as I mentioned to a couple of you as you were joining, we did schedule 2 hours because normally these take 2 hours, but actually this one I think will be just taking 1 hour. So maybe we'll all get an hour back to not sit at a computer today, which I'm sure many of you will enjoy. So we're just going to try and keep it to an hour. As I said, there's no James today, unfortunately, but we're recording, so we'll send that on to everybody who can't be here. And then we're going to focus on these survey results and the future directions discussion. And then we've got a bit of time at the end to have a really open discussion. If there's any points of feedback that the group would like to give, I guess, tailored more towards research evidence data, but if that is more broad on the GPA, then Thomas is also here, so we can also take note on that. So that's where we're going. Before we start, does anybody have any questions, clarifications, things they want to add in to the agenda? Everybody's happy. Good. So survey results. We had quite a lot of people complete the survey. The questions were quite basic and sort of summarizing questions. What we did find was that there was a real mix of opinions, and so don't be surprised when these results aren't conclusive, let's say, and that's because this group has a wide audience, as this slide shows, and also because people need it for different things. So I think keeping flexibility will be something important going forward. So the first question we asked for everybody on the survey, sorry, one moment. I have a dreadful cough. Don't worry, it's not COVID, and any of you can't catch it over the internet, but I apologise. I could really do with James to do with the talking today. So anyway, this slide shows the first question we asked was what sector do people work in? And there was a bit of a cluster here of people working in academia, coming from research backgrounds, and also importantly at the global level. And as you can see, we have no people completing the survey that are field practitioners, although there are people within the network and within the mailing list that come from that background or from the private sector. So the sort of big question, the first question we can kick off with, you see these teal green questions here on every slide. So what I'd like you guys to do is pop in the chat your answer, or if you have a more substantive piece that you want to say, then just raise your hand or start speaking. So the question for the group is here, given that we would like that the majority of this group is from research academia, sort of global technical background, should we focus this group as an audience for research and analysts? So I'll give you a moment to think about that. If you guys agree, just write yes in the chat, or nod your head, or do a little wave or something. And if you don't and you want to say something else, then please just write in the chat. Or if you really want to argue for a different case, just speak up. Already I see participants coming in. Great. Everybody's in agreement. Yep. Whilst people are putting in the chat, Florent, do you want to?
Yeah, just so I think it's quite clear on our side. We want to have data to inform like our progress or our failures and future projects. I think it's quite clear on our side. Just to confirm that.
Yep, great. And we have a few slides coming up later on that talk about the sort of content side and what data topics we might focus on. So we can talk in detail about that then. That's great. Great. So I'm taking from that general assent of happiness that yes, we're happy to sort of focus this on a research space. I would say that for us, or certainly for myself, research is quite a broad term, and it's not just academic research, although that's obviously an important part of it. But we do look at that in a very broad, sort of technical, evidence type way. Great. So next slide. So this slide is on who attends which, or who has attended which calls so far. And as you can see, there's been a real mix. I guess the most attended calls have been the 3 data calls that we've had recently. Well, not recently, March 2020. Gosh, what a year. And last July, and then the data and assessments piece in September. And there was also quite a substantial attendance at our November and December workshops, but we had sent this survey out before that, I think. So that's probably why that's not on here. So they're the most attended calls, but there's been great attendance all the way through, apart from in New York, which, obviously not everybody could make that. So the question for reflection here is, does attendance at these workshops really reflect topic interest, Or is it a little bit more sporadic than that, just depending on people's availabilities at certain moments? And when we could do things in person, you know, obviously not everybody can travel always to Addis or New York or wherever we've had the meetings. So again, if you put in the chat function whether you think that this really reflects topic interest or just general availability. Okay, great. I see some people saying probably it reflects the topics. And I think it's probably a balance of both. But as we come on to talk about the topic choices and the content choices, yes, Adam, many of these slides do seem inconclusive. And that is, I think, partly because this group has a very varied membership. And so people want lots of different things out of it. And we want to try and cater definitely to that. Great. OK, so I think here we can say, look, there's a general preference towards the data, quantitative data topics, and that's something that the GPA coordination unit are working on substantively. So that's no problem for us to focus slightly more on that, especially over the next year, where that does seem to be raising up the agenda. Great. So general consensus there that does reflect interest in the topics and that lots of you, therefore, are interested in the data topic. So future ways of working, and this, if you thought the last one was inconclusive, Adam, wait till you see the next two. So we asked the question, what do you think the group's call should focus on? And here we look at like the way of working, and the next slide looks at the actual content topics. So in terms of the way of working, there's just this huge spread. I mean, what to even make of this? It's great that you all think we should be doing all of these different things. I guess there's a slight leaning towards strategic analysis, this green pillar at the top, around research coordination, the yellow pillar, around sharing results and data outputs, which is the orange pillar, and around baseline development, which is actually I think the blue one, or green one, slightly further down. Have the highest overall results, but at least 2 or 3 people, or actually at least 5 people, wanted all of these elements. So I think it is important to have that flexibility within our group and to be able to cover these range of ways of working, with an acknowledgement that perhaps we should be focusing more at the sort of strategic level and the research coordination level in terms of ways of working. So is everybody happy with that? That's the question for the group here. Should we focus more on research coordination and knowledge sharing rather than, for example, technical support for projects on data and evidence, which was one of the lowest pieces, as was technical data? So is everyone happy for us to sort of focus more at the global level, at the knowledge sharing level, still getting into the specifics when we can? Florence says networking. Yes, we love a bit of networking. Be even better with a beer in person, wouldn't it? Or a soft drink, to be inclusive. I can see you all laughing at me and I just get silence back. No,
we won't go to Great Britain.
No, my God, no, I'm coming to you guys, like Paris, Geneva, that sounds great. Yep, okay, great. Everyone's saying yes to that. I think that's fairly clear. The content piece, which is coming next, might be a little bit, might be less clear. So here we ask the question, should our calls be organized around a specific content theme? And if so, what would you like to cover? And everybody wanted everything. You could do multiple choice here. So there was really a lot of interest along, the clean cooking topic, household electricity. Overall, I think energy for enterprises actually just sneaked in as the winner, but maybe that's just because that topic is having a slightly interesting attention moment. And my favorite topic, obviously, indicators and data down here with the grey bar, also very high results, yes. But overall, there wasn't a topic that wasn't covered. I think that one other comment was monitoring and evaluation should be covered a little bit more substantively within the data and indicators work that we do. So my sort of feeling about this is, shall we keep the content areas the topic areas across all of these areas, so that our way of working is at the strategic level and is at the knowledge sharing level, but within that we have flexibility to cover all these types of topics, because all of us have projects that focus on different things, whether that might be energy for communities or operations, or it might be mini grid specific. So is everybody happy that we cover all of these topics, maybe with a slight focus towards the data and indicators and perhaps energy and enterprises piece at the moment? And Elena's saying we may want to organise calls around deep running challenges, which may be shared across a lot of the specific areas that you're showing. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Yeah, we could certainly think about that. Jonathan, do you have any reflections on that? Whether we could organise things in a bit of a different way to add a bit of structure in terms of getting at really the underlying challenges?
And I'm afraid, do not really understand what type of deep learning challenging regarding data analysis, data collection, evidence assessment.
Yeah, maybe, but maybe Elena, you want to comment directly on that?
Oh, I knew you were going to pull me out for this one. So I think the thought that was in my mind was that in many of the specific areas, household electricity, energy for enterprises, cooking, and whatever else, there are particular social or political or economic challenges that can be revealed, understood, better contextualized, specified, or resolved by availability of data. So we are talking about the data. So it's not about the challenge of gathering data in any context for anything. But if data availability is a problem that needs to be addressed across multiple sectorial areas, then maybe we have a call on what data is available and is it good enough. If the data collection is a challenge, then maybe we have a call on how that is reflected in various other areas. If data is clean, if data is lean, if data is fair or is not fair. So I was thinking more of the characteristics and opportunities that there are there of getting ourselves wealthier, better informed through data, and what are the challenges around its collection, dissemination, storage, curation, and so on and so forth.
Yep, great. Jonathan, any sort of immediate reflections on that piece?
Yes, there is ongoing. I know Energypedia is doing some webinar and discussion around mini grid or several topics. And here, if I understand correctly, is we're trying to talk about the different enabling and environment challenge. So also we will run with the GPA specific webinar work series related to specific aspects of the enabling environment of cooking, of electrification as well. So this is also, we will link this type of specific issues related to a specific intervention in the coming years, and obviously in collaboration with different partners organization. Thank you, Laura.
Great, and I think that on the point there you made, Elena, about asking ourselves questions like, is data available? Is it rigorous? Is it reliable? The answer to all of those questions is no. And I think many people who work in this area know that for sure. But obviously it's interesting to explore that and the dimensions and why that is happening. And so that might be a really useful call as just one example for us to have in the coming few months, as we simultaneously, of course, work on making that data available and collecting it and trying to create a global baseline. Great. OK, so Thomas, I see your hand up and a question there from you. Do you want to?
Not a question, but maybe also building upon what Eleanor just said. When I heard her talking, I thought maybe we can actually link this work much closer to some specific examples in the field. For example, if we would have, I mean, we do have contacts to people in the field, either to organizations and partners, or partners who like NOCAP, who are doing energy assessments, or even UNHCR country operations who are working more on a policy level and regional level. So can we tie them into our work much more? Sorry, it looks like my Wi-Fi is bad. Can you hear me well, Sarah?
It cut out a little bit, but I think we got the essence. So
okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, can we link these topics and our work much more to the needs in the field?
Yeah, and I think that there's certainly space for that. I guess one of the learnings certainly from this survey is that this is a group of global level practitioners, and obviously field practitioners are always welcome, but that's generally not who's on the mailing list and generally not who attends regularly. And so I think linking it to what's happening on the ground in terms of data production and data analysis and how that sort of flows bottom up, great. But I think we should also be a little bit cautious that there are forums for that already. The SAFE network, the SAFE rebrand merger, however that's happening, those types of groups are specifically designed for that. And here I think if we are going to focus going forward more on quantitative data and the processes and challenges around that, then that is perhaps a conversation that is more at the global level than at the field level, but totally take the point that, you know, we should connect things very closely to you know what's happening on the ground and involve more field practitioners as and when they have interest and have time, I guess, which is another, you know, big restriction there. Great. So anybody else want to say anything on this sort of content piece? There's a couple of other questions that sort of would feed into that. I see no other hands raised at this moment, I think. Nope. Okay, in which case we can jump to the next slide, which with this was a more qualitative question, so no bar graph. We asked specifically, are there things that people would like to find useful for us to cover in the calls? We only had 4 people answer that. Most people, I think, used the options to express their opinions. So the suggestions that came out were develop a global baseline, building on the indicators work, a space for us to highlight when calls for funding, networking, collaboration come up, to talk about topics that will bring us closer to building a global baseline, which I guess is the same as the first one, and then alignment of assessment methods. So at least 3 of those are really focusing on this data and assessments topic and how we can sort of move towards the baseline and perhaps starting to collect new primary data. So a quick sort of question for the group: are there any sort of key areas or topics that you would like to be covered this year specifically? For example, do you have something from your own research group or your own work that you'd like to put on our agenda to be a focus topic? I've already taken Elena's points on sort of the challenges around research and Thomas's around field coordination, but is there anybody else got a key topic that they definitely want to present in March or whenever? No, I see no comments, no hands raised, I think. Oh, yeah, there we go. So Ivona, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's maybe less so answering the question directly. There's nothing pressing, but I will think about it and let you know. It's more that, you know, looking at these 4 bullet points, it makes me think that, you know, if you went back to the slides where the sort of topics of interest were highlighted, or, you know, you had the bar graphs, maybe the technical side was kind of like seemed to be less of interest, but this actually points to the kind of opposite, if that makes sense, because it would be quite hands-on, quite technical, quite practical. So yeah, just to kind of highlight that maybe, that the topics would still have to kind of include those more technical questions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the definition of what technical is varies massively depending on your background and where you're sitting. And so what might not be technical for you, me, or Elena might be extremely technical for some other people on the call. So I think that's when we talk about technical data, but I think we're really talking about and technical support specifically. I think there we're talking about putting up massive data sheets and, sharing our Excel spreadsheets and discussing, everything from like enumerator values to the discount rate you use in your modeling. And I think that level of technical is not something maybe for this group. That's maybe better done one-to-one working, whereas the detailed sharing of results and quantitative data points and saying, look, here's the fact, here's the statistic, here's the methodology we used, here's the assessment method, that kind of technical detail, which it is technical detail, so I don't know why I'm doing the fingers, but I think that kind of stuff is really super valuable and is what we have here. So that's more a note for us all to be open-minded about what the word technical means and maybe think of a different word for it. But yeah, definitely, but point well taken. Anybody else, any other topics or ways of working you'd like to see us incorporate over the next few months? Nope, everybody's good. Okay, so on to slide 9, which is the call hosting arrangements. So we asked who should the calls be hosted and developed by? And again, a mix of responses here. I think the general consensus was sort of continue as is, but add in really jointly developing calls with external partners between sort of, our partners we work with and the GPA as co-hosts. I think it's probably still quite useful for you guys to have Jonathan, myself and James sort of doing the organization and the admin side of things. And we have been doing a lot with external partners already. Perhaps having them more as formal co-hosts might be a way to go there. So the question for the group here is a sort of yes/no question. Are you happy for the coordination unit, so myself, James and Jonathan at this moment, to keep coordinating this group, but move towards a more co-hosting partner-led type approach to work directly with people? And again, you can post your yes or no's in the chat and just raise your hands. Yep, a few nods. Great. Jonathan?
Yeah, maybe if we can, maybe as a follow-up to this specific point, we could ask the different organizations that would address a certain topic or a certain issue that maybe they can propose to host a session, and that would be maybe a way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we did at the beginning of last year, or even the year before now, we did exactly have that method, and many groups like the RE4R project at Practical Action, for example, I think Phil and Tracy presented their work, and it was always organised around a specific theme. For example, we had a mini grids one at some point last year. But I think exactly as you said, Jonathan, asking partners, could you lead on this piece? We'll help you organise the calls, but what would you like to see in terms of content would be a great way to showcase all of our work.
Mm-hmm.
Great, right, general consensus here, fantastic. And so we'll move to this sort of co-hosting, but still the GPA coordination unit, providing that organisation admin function. So finally, a slide for you, Adam, which has consensus on it. We asked how often do you think the group calls should be, and almost everybody said quarterly, which is how often we have them now. At last, we have a clear winner. Some people said every 6 months, and a few said I'd like one every 2 weeks. So whoever said every 2 weeks, thank you very much for your passion and enthusiasm. But I'm not sure that will quite be as possible as we would like it to be. You're welcome to have a one-to-one with me every 2 weeks, but I'm not sure everybody else will be able to make the time. So I guess this is a question for anybody who voted monthly. Did you have a specific reason why you thought monthly would be a useful sort of time to have this? Timing to have this? Does anybody want to jump in about that, or are we happy with quarterly calls? Great. Thanks, Elena. Thank you for contributions. We'll see you soon. Everybody seems happy with quarterly. Yep. Yeah, that's an easy one. Good. Over 70% voted for it, unlike Brexit. That's right. There we go. That's my first and last Brexit reference today. So our last question, question 8, we asked, do you have any specific topics that you would like to see in the calls coming up? And somebody said, yes, I'd love to give a talk on climate sensitivity. So whoever that is, please reach out because the survey was anonymous. I have a few guesses about who it could be, but I'll have to send random emails otherwise. And then some people would like to see things on energy survey tools. MEX could contribute on data collection methods, that's great, and the production of a global data baseline. So I guess all of these 3 last points really talk to this focus on data, quantitative data and assessments over the next few months, possibly even the whole of 2021. And so I think it would be great to have a climate talk, for example, focused on the data and the methodologies around that. But I think as a sort of set of topics, it could be useful to focus on baseline development and data and assessments for the next few months. Are there any other, is that a sort of general leaning? Does everybody feel that that would be a useful set of topics to focus on? I know many of us are already working on data in one way or another, so I suspect that's going to be a focus for a lot of us in 2021. Does anybody have a differing opinion, wants to see something else other than a focus on quantitative data? No. Somehow I've only reached out to the quantitative data specialists. Cool. Okay. Well, then that's a nice focus area. Great. So just a little recap from the survey of what we know so far. So there are lots of mixed results. Oh, and I made this slide before I did the final numbers. Sorry, but over 30 people responded. Again, most people from this sort of academic research, global practitioners section, and the calls on data standardization, harmonization and indicators and energy assessment methods were the ones that were most attended. Quarterly calls were clearly wanted. But then aside from those sort of things that we know, there were some very mixed results and sort of inconclusive elements. The hosting arrangements, I think if we're all happy with that, we can propose to having us organise it, but still do more co-hosting and partner-led work. The ways of working, we can focus more at the sort of strategic research coordination, sharing of results and outputs level, but still with that sort of strong technical detailed background. And the content focus, a real mix in terms of the different content topics, but we should probably keep that open. A question for the group. I've put in the yellow box down here a suggestion of the purpose of these calls if we need a purpose statement at any moment. So I'll just read that, but the question for everybody, is that a clear and good way forward? So is the purpose of our GPA research and evidence group calls to have space for researchers, analysts and global practitioners in the humanitarian energy sector to learn about energy evidence, new data and results and progress towards a global energy data baseline? Would anybody like to rip that up and start again, or have things they would like to add or change about that sort of general flexible purpose statement? Thomas, does that read well for you, for example?
My tiny problem is I'm always one slide behind, and I'm still seeing how often do you think the group calls should be? Is it just me? It's just my slow Wi-Fi, or is it a larger problem? I can't see the wording.
Oh, sorry. Is that a problem for everybody, or can you all see this?
That's your Wi-Fi, Thomas.
Ah, okay. Well, I'll put this purpose statement in the chat function, and oops.
But otherwise, it sounded good, Sarah.
Okay. I've put it in the chat function as well for anybody who somehow can't see it. Yep, good. Okay, anybody else? I will call on people. So maybe Owen, just from your point of view, from the sort of, Chatham House background, having done so much through MEI on the research side of this, do you think that that's a useful sort of mini mandate or, scope for us to really be collaborating on collectively, with Chatham House, with all the partners as well?
Yeah, I think it's it looks like it's widely kind of agreed by the group, which is, I think, is the most important thing, and it kind of fits in with a lot of the things that I have wanted to pursue and that we've been working on. I guess just my only reflection would be that the content focus felt very much like people did want that mix and were open to structuring around, particular challenges or different ways of looking at it, rather than kind of simply focusing on kind of one particular issue at a time. And I guess I would be quite interested in thinking about, some of those kind of big picture challenges as well. You know, how do we get a cooking intervention to actually work? Those type of things. You know, and when you think about those big challenges, you obviously see a lot of the issues interrelating and intersecting with each other. So but broadly, very good and very happy.
Yeah, great. And hopefully I think that having that kind of, focus, but also flexibility will enable us as a group to sort of say, this is what this group is about. But, if we want to do a deep dive on, as you said, cooking implementation and cooking data, we can do that. If we want to do the same for mini grids, we can do that. If we want to take a bit of a meta perspective and look at data reliability across all the different sort of content sectors, we can do that. And so I think that flexibility might help us as a group, focus but remain, inclusive. Jonathan, did you want to comment there? I saw you unmute.
I don't think I'm muted.
Oh.
I think from of course the survey, but also the background discussion, and I think there is it's pretty conclusive that people interest are I would say some consensus in household electricity, cooking, and energy for enterprise, and then the content focus. Your last point, some kind of production of a baseline. So I would say there is pretty, agreed interest in the three topics and the production of the metrics to produce a baseline. I would say from what I could discuss and understand, there's a general consensus on those topics.
Yeah, great. And Ivana, I saw you raised your hand as well.
Yeah, I'm just keep reading it over and over again and trying to think of whether it captures everything, and I think it sounds good. Maybe one thing that sort of sprang to mind is energy assessments, in addition to the evidence, new data and results. If you feel like that would be kind of suitable, because I feel like we also are trying to understand how energy assessments are being carried out by various partners at the moment, and that also informs the work on, harmonization of indicators and evidence building, etc., etc. So maybe that would be my only suggestion.
Yep, great. I think that's a great one. So I've included that there in that sort of way. Great. Well, feel free to have a think about that, guys. And if you think of a thank you, Laura. I like to have a nice, simple purpose statement. So I think if you guys have a general reflection on that, sort of, we'll send the slides around when we send the recording around, and you can think of something we've missed or something else you'd like to include, then do have that there. At the moment, we don't really have a need to have a very formal purpose statement or something, but I think it is useful when we describe the purpose of calls to others to have a little statement we can rely on and put in some of the reporting and things. Great. And Owen, just reading your comment there, something on circular economy. Yep. Great. Okay. I think there's a couple of questions coming up about broader take a step back, bigger picture stuff. And so that piece on COVID might be something we want to discuss there. So I guess that some of this has come out in the discussions already on this slide. So some of the suggestions from what we thought from the data survey, from the responses, was to sort of focus on data, quantitative baselines and assessments, for 2020-2021 to keep this range of topics, which I think we're agreed on, and really make sure that we cover cooking, electricity. Enterprises might be something that is rising to the top of the agenda, and so we might want to focus on sooner rather than later. Is anybody from Bristol University on the call, actually? No. Okay. I'll leave them next time to update you guys on that, but they're thinking of putting together a piece of academic research on energy and enterprises, which might be particularly interesting for a few of you. So we can use the calls as a update function on the progress in the sector. So that's reporting, Jonathan and I and others reporting back on when things happen, whether it's from within the GPA or from other organisations. And this purpose of the call, again, we can chat about that more if we want to. But I think an important point, and one that Owen was raising here. Thank you, Valerio, for attending. We'll send the recording later on if you want to listen to the end of the call. So Owen's point here about keeping the flexibility within the content of the calls to really enable new topics that come up to be incorporated, and also the new results and the different progress to be presented. And that may go into different deep dives across different content areas, depending on the very much evolving nature of what we do here. So we had a suggested topic for the next call, which I think James suggested, which was global data in humanitarian energy, what we know so far and how much we might know by the end of 2021. And actually, even though she's not here to see the results of her comments, that's, I guess, something that Elena was sort of picking at earlier, which is that we've made quite a lot of progress now in terms of our own work, but also in terms of the work done by IOM and UNHCR. It's actually a shame Valeria just had to leave, but they've made really a lot of progress there, as have Adam and Anise and Ava at IOM. And so we thought it might be useful to have a session where we reflect on what types of data are coming over the next few months. Obviously, COVID has delayed things massively from last year, but now things seem to start to be improving a little bit. What data points might we know by the end of this year? And is that looking like a global baseline, or is it looking something more like a global sketch? And maybe we'd want to have a reflection. Sorry, I see you laughing there, Thomas, because I'm always trying to say we should be specific with our terminology and not call it a baseline when it's just an idea. But that might be useful for us all to reflect on, especially if we're looking towards that more quantitative piece. So that's something we'll probably send around as an idea and sketch out a little bit what it might look like in an email. Does anybody have any immediate reflections on that topic, or would like to say, no, I want to present on this instead in April? Nope, I see a couple of people saying that sounds good. The baseline is what we're hoping for. Yes, Anne, I see you raised your hand. Yes, please go ahead.
This is really, really interesting work. And I think what we're doing at MEX is developing a baseline data for cooking in humanitarian and other development settings. But one of the key things that I think Laura touched on was the why, and that's really important. And so where the data goes into policies make a big difference of what we're collecting, how we're collecting. Particularly if we're looking at techno-social policy in the long term. So I don't see it in the, simple purpose statement, the why, and I think that's kind of important for people to understand if that's possible.
Yeah, great comment. So, sorry, I'm just noting that down. Jonathan, any reflections immediately on what we should say about why?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, this come back, I think, to the Elena's comment about the underlying root cause of those, the challenge of those people, either for access to electricity or access to cooking. And I think there is a demand from the different partners to discuss those causes, to identify the different drivers. I can talk more about electrification related to this, but definitely this is the beginning of the discussion to start, and with the discussion we had with Practical Action and also Mercy Corps, which are really Mercy Corps trying to focus on on the market-based approach and to try to tackle the underlying cause of the why people have a challenge to access certain technology or certain services. So that's definitely after the April next not workshop, the next discussion that we'll have to organize either on cooking or household, a discussion on the root cause of the energy access challenges.
Yeah, very true, very true. Anne, any further comments on that piece?
No, I agree with Jonathan. That sounds great, and I'm looking forward to April.
Yeah. I think there's also something about the why of the value of data, and as Elena was saying at the beginning, you know, about its reliability, and that where data can be really useful, because sometimes, you know, it's, I mean, obviously I believe that it's always great to have very thorough empirical data, but sometimes for certain arguments the value of data can be, an estimation can be almost as valuable as a very specific quantitative data point. And so maybe perhaps later in the year, once we start to see some of these data examples, so once we have examples to work off, there we could do maybe a session around investigating that and really interrogating, you know, do we need to know that in a very specific way, or is it good enough to know it in a general way, and reflect on the sort of baseline information. You know, there's a lot of that could be characterized under a baseline. So great, I've noted that down as well. Sort of just on this last piece before we move on to our next slide. Oh, sorry, jumping around everywhere. Is there any sort of other comments, ideas, questions that people would have specifically on the things we asked about in the survey? Otherwise, we have a few big picture questions where we can reflect on COVID and other things that we might want to. Did anybody? Oh, Hajar, I see you've just commented there. Terms, yes. I have been thinking about this for a while, so glad that Thomas is here so we can raise this. Something we keep coming up against in certain parts of the sector, energy for enterprises being the main culprit, is that people don't have a solid definition. In fact, there's actually not an agreed solid definition of the term humanitarian energy. Even. And so would it be an idea for us as a group to brainstorm a few of those topics and create little mini definitions for them? Hajar and myself and others have actually already done some, you know, intellectual work to map that out. We could start there as a basis for discussions and try and get to some sort of agreement on a few different terms. And then we could put that forward to the sector to see if that's a set of things that make sense, because I wonder, Thomas, if on the GPA website it would be great to have a little definitions page, and if you're using the term humanitarian energy, here's what it means, because as we've seen in some of our discussions with IOM, for example, energy for displacement and humanitarian energy mean quite different things, whereas I personally use them interchangeably. So is that an idea for something we could do as a little side project almost from this group? Maybe not even have lots of calls on it, but just do a set of emails or document. Would that be a useful thing, Thomas, for us to have on the GPA website?
Yeah, I mean, maybe for the benefit of all, we are revamping our website, and we will add more content also on the website. So, for example, we will have a page where we will also need your input from this group on key arguments, killer facts around our topic. So that's one point, and we could certainly also include a sort of a couple of definitions here. I don't think I tell a secret here when I say that even in the steering group of the GPA, the term humanitarian energy is not seen in the same way by all the partners. So while I'll think this is more, I see it the same way as Sarah. So for me, it's the humanitarian energy is what we are doing, and this is for me the broad term we're working on, the broad mandate we're working on. I hear from a couple of steering group members that there are distinct differences between humanitarian, displacement, legal definitions of refugees and displaced population and internally displaced people who come into this discussion. So we have to be careful. I'm not sure if it makes sense to invest a huge amount of time into this discussion, because you can go on forever. And if you then look at, for example, from a legal perspective, it would come to a very different angle. However, for the benefit of the website, for the benefit of the wider audiences, why not? Why not coming up with some key definitions here, as we have, for example, key statements within the GPA as such, why the GPA exists and what our mission and vision is, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And I think just as a point of reflection there is a way to do that in a inclusive way, because also importantly, those terms change slightly as we evolve as a sector. Even the terms we were using when we wrote the framework back in 2018 have changed slightly. And a key example of that is the discussion on productive use. Productive use used to, in the old fashioned GIZ days, used to just refer to like milling and people using like really hardcore machinery, and now has been extended informally, but not in the literature really that formally, to include service providers and to include like hairdressers and people like that, which wouldn't traditionally have been included under the definition of productive use because they weren't using heavy machinery to be a hairdresser. And so I think there's a way within such statements to include, you know, bullet points or flexibility, or say this is an evolving statement, and to keeping that refreshed as we develop, rather than it being a static set of definitions. The one thing we might want to statically define, however, is energy for displacement, which I think we've done already somewhere in the GPA documents. Does anybody have any reflections on that sort of definitions piece? Anne, I see your hand is still up, but that might be from last time. I see your comment there, Florent, about PUE. I'm not going to make a joke about you should have told the Germans that 20 years ago, but for those of us who are feeling old at the moment, we remember those original documents. Right, okay, cool. So this is, I think, probably all we want to talk about in the survey specifically. So a couple of big picture feedback, we have some time for that now. So I will add just COVID in here so we can have a moment to reflect on that as well. So in terms of the priority areas for data and analysis, it would be great to hear from you guys. Like, is there one burning thing you really want to know over the next sort of 6 months to a year? Just in general, do you want what things that you want to know, whether or not this group can help you know that? You might, for example, I think somebody said earlier, really be interested in, maybe that was you, Owen, really interested in learning about cooking implementation and what types of cooking models really work. So if you guys could post in the chat function, what is your one burning thing you would be keen to know about in the research and evidence data space? A big question. Jonathan, do you want to comment something?
I don't, if anyone has a specific idea of the metric they are looking for or wanted to provide related to a certain topic, that would definitely be of help. We are already, as Sarah mentioned, in discussion with different, for instance, just for an example, GOGLA or SC4All also, we are starting to see opportunity for them to provide us with, for instance, GOGLA for sales data from different countries that would inform of the national energy market, and C4All for different household data metrics. So we're in discussion with them with specific metrics to get from them so that we can build certain type of information and evidence in a BI tool or in a certain reporting. So any one of you who would be interested in certain metrics or to contribute to certain metrics, that would be definitely of help to continue the discussion.
Great. And I see Hajraz put here about the HEED piece of new briefing paper on cooking behavior. I guess this would be really good for you guys to connect with Ivona and Anne Tran, who were at Loughborough and the MEX program on that. You guys probably all know each other. Oh, definitely, you all know each other, but maybe good to connect specifically on that piece. And Thomas asking the question, can we use satellite data for the baseline? We're actually just discussing that yesterday with Luke, 2 days ago with Luke Saveri from SE4All, who are doing a big piece on integrated energy planning. That's the big piece that that SE4All are going to be focusing over this year, and they have 2 case studies coming up, one from Nigeria and one from Sierra Leone. That's not specifically on humanitarian energy, that's on national planning within Nigeria and Sierra Leone, but within that, especially within the Nigerian contexts, they have they want to explore the displacement, internal displacement and refugee displacement that's happening there. Great, I see some exchange going on the satellite question, and Adam is interested in better understanding the missing data gaps. Yes, yep, this is a very good point. Yeah, we were pushing for it, Owen, but Nigeria, yes, I think, because it's clear that that's an issue there. Sierra Leone, I'm not sure. I think it wasn't formally in their terms of reference, but it depends on who applies for that, how much that might get covered, I think.
To answer Adam on his comment on the missing data that would be of interest from the private sector, I would say that one of the main which come up regularly is the capacity of the basically beneficiaries or customers to generate a certain income to pay for the service. So that's one of the first missing data that we have for the moment for a specific community, and that's typically the type of data house to household data collection that we are missing and difficult to have.
Yeah, and I think if our next call does indeed focus on the global data baseline and what that could look like by the end of the year, I think when we draw that up literally in slides, there will be these huge gaps where you see that there just isn't any information, and actually to some extent there is no plans. There are no plans to gather that information as well. So that piece will be covered there as well. Great. Okay, and then a couple of general reflections. What role would you guys see us as the coordination unit, of which, you know, Thomas and Jonathan and Amy Jenks and, you know, lots of others, Sadiq, of course, as well, are involved in? How can we support this work more thoroughly? Does anybody have any specific ideas or pieces of feedback you'd like to give us? You know, is there one thing you think we should be doing that we're not doing? Feel free to post that in the chat or email me afterwards if you don't want to post to everybody publicly. Yeah, that's a very good point, Anis, on learning from failure. My experience in the past, we used to have a learning from failure seminar series at DFID, and it was the singularly most fractious, difficult set of seminars that we had there, because people would come and they would present how their programs had failed and then get attacked for failing. It is very difficult to persuade people to come and present how data has failed or programs have failed, because people are always defensive and they always want to make the best out of things. But we could have a think about how we might approach that topic in a sort of sensitive, open way. Unless anybody wants to step forward right now and say, yeah, I'd love to present on failure.
I wouldn't mind doing some things, reflecting on the things that didn't work in MEI. I mean, you know, certainly we had some things that worked and we had some things that didn't work, and be more than happy to think about that. I think more broadly, though, it could be interesting to bring together all of those who have so far tried to bring or tried to incentivize private sector actors within humanitarian settings, and try to think about what has worked and what hasn't worked in each of those examples. I mean, you know, when I think about MEI and BBox, obviously we essentially gave a grant to set up shop. Some things worked well, but ultimately it hasn't really kind of proved a resilient business model. Obviously, RE4R have worked with a couple of solar home system companies, taken different approaches, some of which have, had great results and some of which are maybe less good. And I just think there's a whole bunch of different things that have now been tried, and we're really starting to get towards a good evidence base on what is working and what is working less well for the private sector in humanitarian settings. I don't think we have a perfect example yet, by the way.
Yeah, I would agree. That's great. And I saw Laura posting in the chat that RFRA has a case study going through publishing at the moment. Laura, do you have a name for that case study so that I don't refer to it as the failure case study in my notes?
It's a case study looking at a comparison of the facilitation of the 2 solar home system private sector companies that we've worked with. I should know the title because I've been doing the copy editing on it, but yeah, I'll post it in the chat now and grab it for you.
Great. Okay, that would be fantastic.
What has worked and what went as we might have expected and what hasn't.
Great. Okay, well, that's 2 volunteers straight away.
Thank you.
Great. So if we have 2 of those approaches, and Owen is politely suggesting that NDEV might have some examples from the past of things that haven't worked. I know, Florent, you're just starting your new round of pilots yet, so it would obviously be too early to say if those have worked or not. But are there examples from the past in the humanitarian energy space where you guys might want to reflect? Because it would be lovely to have a 3rd case study, and then we could have a topic around failures or challenges.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a lot of failures. I would be happy to anyway share the data that we collected for 2020 in the project of interest. I'm too new to know about the failures.
I would say, if I can go on the positive note, that I would say we are really at this stage at the very early development phase of market-based approach in humanitarian sector. So I will talk more about trial and errors rather than failures, because here most of them were kind of pilots. And so that's, to a certain extent, its successes, because in pilot you're looking for lessons learned. So at least if you learn something, it's already a success. So I don't think we can talk here about failures, but more about errors and lessons learned.
That's actually a really good name for it, Jonathan, actually, to call it trial and errors or something, because a lot of those projects were pilot projects.
We won't have many customers for this.
But it is really nice to be able to talk about openly about failures. And I think Owen posted earlier that he might have been getting NDEV and SNV confused, and actually, and they're not on this call, I think, but the SNV colleagues do have quite a good example, I think, of the one of the early rounds of the MBEA project, whether it was called that or not, that they focused very heavily on training, and they didn't back that up with investment money, and that wasn't their fault. That's just they didn't know to do that, and as a result, that project really struggled to get off the ground. So that might be another one we could approach Susanna and others to talk about trial and errors later in the year as a topic.
And another one, I think, would be the Zatari project, where they just provided electricity for all, like for free, and then the system just crashed, and they had to do like metering and do a certain revenue collection model that pay as you go, or a certain model to monitor the consumption level of each one of the beneficiaries. So that's, I think, also another trial and errors good example.
Yep, great. I think there are a couple of people putting in the chat that there might actually be enough examples here to have 2 topics, one on implementation challenges and the other more around private sector and how the ways of working with there. And it could be that we have, 3 different case study. We have 6 case studies, and 3 speak to one and 3 speak to the other. So we can do a bit of brainstorming on what that should look like. One sort of small note of caution before we agree that as a topic for the data research working group. I think that, and Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong, that this topic might be broad enough for it to be of interest to lots of people, not just the membership of this research focused group. And so it could be that we try and schedule that more broadly with other GPA members as well. What do you think?
You think in general the private sector approach?
As Jonathan was saying, the errors and what was his polite term? Trial and errors, the failure, learning from failures type piece. That might be something that it has strong research and data evidence elements to it, but actually I think it might be really interesting for a lot of people. So let's see where we want to host the call, but we can definitely have a call on that somewhere, whether it's this group or
there will be the HNPW coming up, so the Humanitarian Network and Partnership Week in Geneva. Usually it's in person, but this time it's everything online, starting mid-April, going for 4 weeks. And we may want to do a couple of sessions there, and maybe that's one of them.
Great. Okay, I've noted that in the notes that we can discuss that further after this call. Right. Okay. So sorry, we don't want to run behind time. So I see lots of other suggestions here. Is there anything anybody particularly wants to flag? I'll read them in detail later on. But apparently, everybody wants to talk about failure. Sorry, I just skim these. Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll have a brainstorm around internally and have a think about where that fits, but noted especially, Benjamin, your work with RBF, with Practical Action Nepal, and Hajar, your field work as well, and from the policy side. Great. Okay, so to not pull us too far off track on this, maybe we could spend a couple of minutes reflecting on specific ways of working together in the next few months and how much COVID has changed all our lives. Obviously, we always hosted these calls online, actually, so that everybody could attend. But we did try to have, once or twice a year, a core group of us would meet at some event or another, and we would have sort of in-person reflections as well. I guess, Owen, you mentioned COVID earlier. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that might have affected or continue to affect the data and research world, and how that might then feed through for our calls? We can talk about that.
I don't know what to say. I guess just, well, I guess it's for a start, it's harder for all of us to access humanitarian settings. It's harder for the companies, the businesses, the energy providers we work with to work in humanitarian settings, and all of that I think has impacts on those of us who are doing data collection or want to actually change things on the ground. Obviously, I spoke to Javier and Manuel at Alianza Shure, a couple of days ago, and it's just terrible, the type of hurdles and barriers that they've had to try and get through over the last year. So there's I think that is obviously an issue for us as researchers and as people trying to collect information. But I guess the bigger questions for us to consider are are we actually going to be taking steps back from the small amount of progress that we have made over the last 5 years? As we've had more projects approved, we've had more things actually start happening, and we have to kind of question whether any progress that we have made over that period might have gone backwards. Has work been lost? Have businesses and things that started been unable to work in specific places? Have things broken? All of those questions, I think, are things that we should be thinking about after COVID, and there's not a lot of answers out there at the moment, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And for those of you who have managed to stay happily uninvolved in the British politics side of things, we have also, as a country, decided to reduce our commitment to international aid from 0.7% to 0.5%, which I gather is falling even further at the moment. And so a lot of the money that DFID, FCDO put into this space in the past may not be available in the future. We're still hopeful that it will, and sustainable energy is still very high on their priority list. And also they don't just spend directly on that. They spend, for example, through the research councils, and then the research councils have autonomy on what to spend in. So I guess from that side of things, you know, and that Brexit, that pressure is coming both from Brexit, but also from COVID and the impacts on, or future impacts on the economy as well. And so I guess that is a depressing thought, but I think that there is still quite a lot of funding and research funding around out there. It may be that in the future we have to go forwards and tailor our work a little bit more specifically to the other needs that are coming out, whether that be COVID recovery or response in the next few months, and then hopefully recovery or other sort of topics, in order to maintain this level of work. I guess from my own personal reflection, we always had these calls online so that people could attend wherever they were in the world. And I think that that will continue for lots of our different calls and projects now, but even more so for our group to remain inclusive. Jonathan, did you have any reflections on this particular topic?
No. On the positive note, that might mean that UK might be the recipient of international aid.
That was a Guardian article. Let's not. UNICEF have already started feeding our children, so let's just not. We apologise once again for being British. Yes. Okay, let's bring it round to a slightly more positive note. Are there any specific ways we could work together over the next few months? Could we be a bit more interactive? Do you want to see James and I in full costume when we present? Do we need to do more things? Yes, Thomas says yes. Do we want to do more interactive things like polls as we go along, or videos, or, you know, feel free to feed this back to us directly in emails as well if you don't want to say here, but would be good to hear if you're happy with the way that these calls are organised, and if there's things we could do to make it more exciting or more boring and structured, if you like things that way. Great. Thomas says joint fundraising. Yes. This might be a conversation more for one-to-one, but part of the role of the GPA coordination unit is to support projects in fundraising and do co-fundraising, and we do that specifically from our roles as the data co-chairs. If you have a research proposal that you're putting in, whether that's for, you know, a junior research fellowship for you as an individual, or it's a big research project you want to put forward for £1 million or £10 million, then feel free to share those proposals and ideas with us, and we're happy to offer peer review comments. We're happy to offer advice on who to work with as partners or what countries to work in, and obviously comments on, you know, if you're proposing to collect a certain data set, we might be able to say, okay, have you looked at this data set that already exists, and talk about the comparability of those types of issues. And we can do that in our technical research capacities as well as in our coordinating capacities. Of course, we will keep your proposals and ideas confidential. We won't forward them out to everybody, but we do very much believe in collaboration rather than competition. And so we will always say, you know, if there's somebody else, if, for example, anybody in this call really wants to work on energy and enterprises, Bristol University are thinking of developing something on that topic. And so we would say, talk to these guys and see if you guys want to work together on those types of topics. Anne says breakout rooms for greater discussion on topics and feedback. Yes, very good point. Certainly for our baseline discussion, which will probably be the next April call, we can try to do that. Put that in the notes, sorry. Great, ways of working. Sorry, I missed that comment, Amy. Channels between researchers. Yeah, and actually, on Amy's comment specifically, is Wafa on the call? Don't know if she's here. Oh, you are there. Hi. So I'm just about to talk about your work and praise you. So Wafa has set up a network of sort of, let's call us early career researchers, which for my benefit is anybody under 40, but most of us are a little bit younger than that, who are working on academic research from a sort of, you know, early career perspective. It is a bit UK based at the moment, but it doesn't need to be because we just do remote calls. And Wafa has very kindly set that up from her position at UCL. And the idea, I think, Wafa, correct me if I'm wrong, is to have calls sort of every quarter to really support each other and be sort of peer-to-peer support, because working as a researcher in humanitarian energy in an academic context can be quite lonely and isolating because there's only like 5 of us doing it. So if anybody would like to join that, please do reach out to Wafa and myself. Wafa, did you want to say anything about that group, about its purpose and our potential next call?
Not much. I've just sent my email in the chat, so anyone who's interested, please do feel free to email me and I'll add you in. But I think mainly just that it's still kind of quite open at the moment. It's just the beginning stages, so there's a lot of scope to shape it in any direction that people have ideas for. But yeah, send me an email.
Great, thanks, and thanks for taking the initiative to do that, and for having space for us all to chat about things. And lots of the members of this group, Anise, for example, Ivana and myself are involved in that as well. And Amy, I realised I only read half your comment, and that it then went on to talk specifically about academics who are interested in specifically supporting on technical side for implementation partners. I think that that's great, and if anybody wants to do that, again, that can be part of our function as coordinators. Reach out to us and say, look, as the HEED project has done multiple times in the past, you know, with researchers working with Elena at Coventry, they want to work on this particular topic, but they also want to know how will that be useful for practitioners. And we at the GPA and other organisations, for example, early discussions with FAO, have sort of tried to matchmake needs and demands and resources in that way as well. Great. I see lots of other comments, and Anne posting a call for funding if anybody wants that there, is interested in LEAP funding. Great. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, we'll try and finish at past. Just one sort of point of reflection from Jonathan and myself. We had our data workshops in end of November, early December last year. And we, for lots of reasons, not least that we were very tired, decided that we wouldn't do a full workshop report at that moment. And now we've had a little bit of feedback from certain key partners, including the presenters at those workshops, that probably a big full workshop report might not be the most useful thing. And rather, we should put our efforts into these types of activities and the baseline activities going forward. But we would still like to do some sort of output from the workshop reports. So from the workshops in the winter last year. So what we were proposing is that we would do some sort of visualization of the work that was done and the discussions that were held. Obviously, that we recorded the events, and that's all linked via a little short blog already on the GPA website. But we'll probably do more like a visualization and some short text around that, maybe just 2 pages instead of 20 pages as a workshop report would normally be. Does anybody have any strong feelings about that and would definitely like a workshop report, or are you guys happy enough just to have the recordings there and a sort of visualization short text linked available that might be more useful for some people in any case? Everybody's happy with just a short piece? Yep, I think generally that's shorter is better in the crazy times that we live in. Great, thank you, Sadiq. You just posted the short blog there that we created that has the links to the recordings, should you wish to share that stuff with everybody. Yeah, Thomas, I see your hand up.
Yeah, very fine with short and sweet and overview. I just wanted to, if I may, answer Hajar's comment on the mentor point I made. May I?
Yes, of course. Sorry,
yes.
I'm struggling to keep with the chat, but do go. Hajar asked, you suggested energy mentors. Was that right? Just to maybe give a bit of background on that.
Yeah, I don't know if mentors is the right word, but what we are seeing regularly is we are approached by by anyone, for example, by NGOs or by academics who want to work on this, and they have a connection to a certain country or a certain refugee setting, and but they have no idea how to go about it. Or we see sometimes we are getting project proposals for review, and we think, oh my God, let's where to start here. And so it would be helpful to have a sort of a list of volunteers who we could approach and guide them or connect them with another person, as I said, an NGO or an academic or whatever, who is fairly new to this topic, who would need an introduction, and maybe this mentor or this champion could support these project development, for example. So that is what I had in mind, and that was an open question for all participants, if there would be an interest to act as a mentor, if that is something we could develop within this group for the benefit of concrete projects on the ground.
Yep, definitely. And maybe just come back to Hajar. Does that sort of answer your question there, Hajar? Would that be something, for example, you would be interested in the future?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the whole failing forward concept comes to mind. So having that kind of mentorship would be really interesting on projects. So it's a great way to learn from the failures as well. And yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Thomas. Great. And just a point of reflection, I guess, on that is that that's something that Jonathan and James and myself already do quite a lot of. And it was easy and manageable when we were a community of 30 to 50 people. Now we're a community, a humanitarian energy community of more like 500 people. There's a new proposal every week, and there's a new idea every week, and there's a new master's student every week. And so that becomes a little bit more challenging to do those introductions. I think certainly from my own perspective, when those people do come to us, I tend to think, is there somebody more expert in me that could help with this? But when it's especially early career researchers, when it's master students, when it's academics, I think we do have a responsibility as the GPA sort of data and evidence leads to step up and say, yeah, we're here. Let's go back to basics. Let's ask ourselves what research, academic, primary research questions could be of use here. So do keep calling on us for that, but also Thomas's point about other mentors and how we can connect up technical people working within the organizations as well. Great. And I wanted to just to quickly comment on Hajar's other comment, which is about the HEED, sorry, I've forgotten what it's called, the HEED conference report. Do you want to mention that briefly, Hajar, about the fact that that's now online for people to read that and learn from that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just so that it's online, and please feel free to kind of download it and disseminate. It's a really interesting report, and a lot of discussions took place for whoever was there in December. So it's been written up, and yeah, there's some interesting kind of qualitative findings in there as well, and kind of further research questions, which again will be interesting for any kind of upcoming projects, especially from an academic perspective. So yeah, that's it. I put up the link. I think in the chat, so please feel free to download it.
Great, thank you. And I think that unfortunately I wasn't able to be at the HEED conference after 4 years of supporting the project because my grandmother died and it was her funeral that day, but I would very much have loved to be there. I know loads of you were there and it was a great project, and really good to see that report out there and as a resource for people to reference as well as we go forward for other academic projects to acknowledge the strong work that the HEED project has done at the University of Coventry and all those that were involved in developing it, including Anne Tran and myself back in the original day. Great, so we just have a couple more minutes. Jonathan and I would also like to present where we're going with the data work stream in a sort of more meta way, the work that we do day to day. So before we come on to that, does anybody have anything else they want to say, points of feedback on these meta questions, or even small points about how we work together? Raise your hand, feel free to point in the chat. Jonathan, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Not for now, no.
Great. Nope, everybody seems good, happy. Phil says his experience is that everyone is very welcoming. Yes, we're a big, weird family, and we love to welcome other new members of the family in. So if you need support, just ask us, and even if we're not the right person to ask, we'll point you towards who might be or who is. Great. Okay, so for the last couple of slides, we just will briefly reflect on these data workstream activities. Thanks, Owen. Great to have you. Sorry, this is such a busy slide, but there is a backup document online should anybody wish to look at that. So we just wanted to sort of end the call really by feeding back to you guys on the data workstream activities, which have now sort of shaped into an organized slide. So this is where I really need James to talk about this sort of thing. So this is the work that Jonathan and I really do on a day-to-day basis. And so we thought we'd just reflect very briefly on the key activities there and our short-term, medium, sort of longer-term activity throughout this year. And so you see on this slide 5 pillars that we are working on, labelled A to E. Pillar A is actually where these types of calls sit. That's about guiding the sector, exchanging knowledge, really supporting you guys in what you're doing, sharing knowledge, learning from each other, collaborating. And so one of our main ways of doing that is hosting these calls, getting everybody talking, and producing summaries of our different workshop reports and technical things that we do. So that's sort of pillar A that flows along the top here. And then pillars B, C, and D are what we like to call the meat in the sandwich, which is the real sort of content-based work. So pillar B really talks about sort of the work that I'm leading with UNHCR and IOM on integrating energy data into their existing processes. So that's really being led by those institutions on what they are already doing and what they want to do, and helping them be more efficient, helping them learn from the energy access sector and from all the information that we already know as a group, and really getting that information thoroughly plugged into those institutions. And that might include in the future working with groups like ESMAP, as well as supporting global data production on this topic. So actual data collection rather than just analysis and collaboration.
Sarah?
Yes, go on, sorry.
If I can add on this process, is really the background or the work done in advance to build the baseline. So this is really the work that IOM and UNHCR are doing for the moment on the data collection methodology and the metadata definition and everything that has to be done in order to arrive to a baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so that's sort of the work that we're doing there under pillar B. And then pillar C and D, I'll just reflect quickly on, and then Jonathan, maybe you want to add a little bit of detail there. Pillar C is really about sort of developing technical tools and energy survey work, and sort of the work that the GPA coordination unit actually produce and develop ourselves, including the BI tool and the indicators mapping piece of work we've done there. And then pillar D is about data analysis, as well as some potential future data collection. And there we're looking at sort of how can we support the sector in developing this sort of baseline, and what analysis could we at the GPA do on that, including some of the killer facts that Thomas mentioned earlier that we'll reach out on soon. So there's a sort of whole 2 sets of pillars of work continuing on those topics. Jonathan, do you want to say a little bit more about the BI tool and information sharing?
Yeah, so the objective here for those 2 processes, the technical side with the BI tool and the analytical side, is really with the GPA, we're trying to offer the service to aggregate all the different metrics from the different partners, whether humanitarian, energy, livelihood, or national energy market, settlement infrastructures, all the data from the different data providers, agreeing with them on the different metrics, then also working on the comparability, and then the selection, the methodology, the collection methodology. So all those different aspects in order to integrate, aggregate all those information into data evidence, into a platform where we can that lead us go there to the work, analytical work, and that we can provide our partners with a platform with all those data aggregated and with analysis that makes sense for decision making or to guide also the partners to a certain direction of intervention. That's basically the aim of this those two processes.
Yep, great. And lots of you will have been involved in that directly with either Jonathan or myself. But for those of you who are for not, we thought we'd just give a brief update on that. And Sadiq is posting a link there to the BI tool. I think is that link, Sadiq. So if you guys want to look at that information in any more detail, please just do click that link or contact us, and we're happy to talk more about it. The last pillar of work that we're looking at is pillar E down the bottom here, which is sort of building this more collective understanding on humanitarian energy. And that's something that we'd love to do more with Owen and Chatham House. And they're really understanding the sort of bigger picture about research and evidence in the humanitarian energy sector. So just as one of the last slides here, what we've done here is map those three core activities, the meat in the sandwich, against different partners that we're working with. And so you can see here UNHCR working through their DRS team. Sorry, that's the wrong acronym there. It says DTM, but it means DRS. And working with IOM on their DTM work and energy assessment piece with Anis and Adam, who are on the call today, as well as working with MEX, of course, with Ivona and Longsen and Tran. Also, of course, working with UNEP DTU with James on different topics, and SC for All you see popping up here in the orange bubbles. And so I think that's really just a point of reflection for us. I don't want to talk about, spend ages chatting about what all those different pillars do and how we work exactly with those partners, but just to reflect that we really try and work collaboratively on this data topic with different partners, because the expertise for this topic lies in so many different individuals and so many different institutions. And so there are lots of points of collaboration and coordination where we really try and work collectively together. So I'll just leave that slide up for a moment. Does anybody have any questions specifically on our work streams within our data work stream, our pillars within our data work stream, or on these partner collaborations on what we're doing specifically there? Nope. Many of you have had this presented to you directly, so you had the opportunity to ask those questions then. And I see a lovely little chat going on between Amy and Phil in the side chat, so that's nice. I just leave that where it is. You guys do that. Great. Okay, so everybody's happy with this. That was all we really wanted to cover today. So, yeah, thanks. No, Jonathan, any sort of comments, reflections from you?
Yes, last point. Maybe if we could set a certain agenda with the killer facts. I just wanted to emphasize a little bit the request or interest in the killer facts for the sector, so energy and humanitarian settings.
Yes, great. So some of you will know in detail about this and will be bored by hearing this summary again, but some of you might not. So what we are hoping to do at the GPA is produce a 3-year report, because it has been 3 years, it will be 3 years since the GPA was launched in New York in 2018, which seems like yesterday, but was in fact 3 years ago. And for that report, we're hoping to produce something about the GPA's work, but also a bit more of a reflection from the sector. And within that, or as an input for that report, we'd love to hear about killer facts. So from your work, any of your work, whether that's you as an academic or you as a practitioner, you on a project or just something you've read, are there pieces of information, statistics, facts that you have come across in the last 3 years that have made you think, oh my God, that's the one fact that's so important, or that's something that is, a real key piece of information that I think everybody should know. And whether that's a fact from a project like RA4R, or it's a fact from research analysis, like the big pieces that Chatham House have done on fueling aid, on that fantastic report that they did in 2019. or it's another type of, statistic key fact. Some of those facts I'd like to add, we call them killer facts. That's actually a deeply insensitive way of calling them, and it's myself that uses that term most often, I think, because some of them actually are about the deaths of number of people due to indoor cooking emissions, and some of them are pretty horrible facts actually about the choices that women are forced to make when they don't have enough fuel to cook in refugee camps. They have to starve their families, they have to decide not to feed their grandmother, they have to undercook their food and give themselves food poisoning because they don't have enough fuel. So some of them literally are killer facts and physical health impact facts. Some of them are just more, really things we should all be aware of. So if you have those types of facts from your own research, please do reach out to Jonathan and myself in the first instance. We're sort of doing a bit of an assessment, collating some of those, both facts that sort of already exist and have been published and facts that are more buried within project type work, to be able to showcase those in this report. And we hope to work with Ivona and the MEX programme on doing a bit of analysis on what this global baseline, global sketch could look like of data, to be able to publish that over the summer. And so that's sort of a call from Jonathan and myself. Please do send those reports, links to the reports, or just keep, facts in bullet points and emails to us, and we will be able to aggregate those and reflect on them. Jonathan, did you want to add anything? Did that capture that adequately?
No, not at the moment. Just wanted to mention this, yes.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you, Sarah.
And Thomas says maybe we could collect these facts in the next meeting. I think what we'd actually like to do, Thomas, is collect the facts before the next meeting and then present them back and reflect them back in the next meeting, and then maybe add to them if people have other comments, because our next meeting will likely be in April. So we hope to have done a bit of an analysis and work on that before then.
Yes.
Yes. Jonathan's
Yes.
our timekeeper, so if he says yes, he means yes. Okay, great. Thomas, anything from your side you want to flag? Nope. Great. Okay. Other
No,
GPA.
just
Go on.
sorry, Sarah. Maybe my Wi-Fi is fading out again. No, actually, from my side, just a thank you to all who are on the call today, but also more importantly to you, Sarah, and also to James and Jonathan, and who are driving this topic forward now. It is such a crucial topic, and it's also one of the topics which everybody's talking about, but nobody really cracked the nut of data in humanitarian settings. So it's really important that we have this group and we can have regular exchanges about this topic and drive this work plan forward as you just outlined. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll pass your thanks on to James, who very unfortunately couldn't be here today. So, and I just wanted to check in with our other GPA colleagues. Amy, Sadiq, you're both on the call. Amy, I've seen loads of fantastic chat going on from you in the chat function with Phil and others. Is there anything else you guys wanted to flag or ask of this group as we're having this sort of reflection moment? Amy, if you're talking, you might be muted. Nope. Okay. Great. Nothing from Sadiq except to look at that link and reflect on the data if everybody wants to see the link on the BI tool that Sadiq posted. Great. Okay. Well, does anybody else have anything else we want to talk about? Any last comments? Otherwise, I think we can draw to a close. Thank you so much, guys. No comments, in which case, oh, sorry, did somebody just unmute? No, maybe that's my Wi-Fi now. So, okay, in which case, thank you so much, guys. And I was a bit worried that without James here to talk about all the different things he normally talks about, that we'd be a silent call. But maybe it's good if he's not around. We get lots more done and we talk, everybody else gets the space to talk a lot. Hopefully he won't listen to this recording and hear me say that. So thanks so much, guys. And really looking forward to the next one. We'll send a few emails talking about the next call, scheduling that, and also on specific asks on the killer facts. So thanks, guys. Really great to see you all. Hope to see you again in April and talk to lots of you before that. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Bye.